Hello everyone, I'm Michelle B. Cultura, TCC1A student, and I'm here to review about what I've learned in Educ 1, Child and Adolescent Development. Why do we need to study development? We need to study development in order for us to understand mechanisms that produce human behavior, to understand our nature, and to understand ourselves. To answer questions such as, are we products of our environment? Are we a reflection of our genes? The study of development is really important for the parents in understanding of the typical infant, child, adolescent development can help them deal with their offspring and guide them to successful futures. For the teachers, in understanding of the typical infant, child, and adolescent development can help them teach children reading, can help them decide when to begin instruction, can help them decide to vary instruction, can help them identify behaviors, can help them deal with aggression, and can help them apply. Developmentally appropriate practices. What is the main changes over time? More specifically, development means predictable changes that occur in structure or function over the lifespan. So, lifespans, infancy is from 0 to 2 years old, early childhood, 2 to 7 years old, middle childhood, 2 to 7 years old, adolescents, 12 to 18 years old, young child adulthood, 18 to 14 years old, 40 years old, middle middle adulthood, 40 to 65 years old, and then older adulthood, 65 years old and up. So there are aspects of development we need to study in physical development, psychomotor development, cognitive development, and socio-emotional development. So let us proceed to a brief history of childhood. Archaeological evidence shows that children long ago were killed as religious sacrifices and sometimes buried in walls of buildings to strengthen structures. In 1999, the mummified remains of a 15-year-old girl were found in the mountains of Argentina. Anthropologists called her La Doncella, the maiden, and she and two younger children were apparently sacrificed in an annual Inca corn harvest ceremony about 500 years ago. During Greek-Roman times, children were sold into slavery for domestic work or as prostitutes and used as collateral for loans. Infanticides, the killing of an infant, was a common and legal practice in Europe if a child is sickly, deformed, or one of twins, illegitimate, a girl, or otherwise unwanted. Child abandonment was outlawed in Europe in the 1600s, and foundling homes are established where mothers could bring their unwanted infants and have them cared for by the church. In the 1700s, one quarter of the infants born in Paris became foundling, according to Katz 1986. Unfortunately, wet nurses were rare, and in the days before baby formula, infants were fed porridge and death rates exceeded 60% according to Hardy 1999. So in children in the 21st century, many of the accounts on the conception of childhood belong to Western civilization. Despite the discrepancy in how children around the world are treated, the view of childhood that evolved in the West over the past 500 years has been accepted by the United Nations. The United Nations in 1989 approved has been ratified by all by two or the 192 members of the United Nations. So infancy is covering by birth to age 2. The early childhood covering ages 2 to 7. Middle childhood covering ages 7 to 11, and adolescence covering ages 11 to 22. This breakdown of ages provides rough correspondence with the stage theories of Piaget, Erikson, and Bronfe-Brenner too. Within each stage, a theory document will describe how development typically proceeds through the major developmental channels including physical, mental, emotional, and social and sexual developments. A second applied document will address appropriate parenting skills in light of what is known about children's development within each stage. It is important to remember that while these documents will make general statements about when developments occur in a child's life, each child will nevertheless develop at his or her own speed, and that even within a given child, certain channels may progress faster than others. For example, a 12-year-old may have the physical growth and change of an adolescent but mentally still be in the concrete operational stage. This is normal because often one aspect of a child's being will mature faster than another. Most of the time, giving the right nurturing and stimuli, everything will catch up in the end. These ages are just an average and should be looked at as a general guide rather than a rule. When babies are in infancy, they are changing from being totally dependent on caregivers to learning to walk, to talk, to play outside others, and are realizing they are their individual selves. When children enter early childhood, they continue to improve their large and small motor skills as they run and move more smoothly. They also grow mentally and socially as they enter schools and other places where they interact with children. And during middle childhood, children continue to grow and improve physically while also growing mentally as they attend schools. They mend friendships in large same-sex groups are begin forming ideas about gender roles and jobs. During adolescence, people go through puberty as their bodies mature and become capable to reproduce. Teens attempt to assert their individual identity while still needing rules and limits to continue to help them make good life decisions. During later adolescence, young adults begin the task of finding a life, calling, or job, and of finding or creating their own next generation family. Even more milestones and more in-depth information will be explained and explained. Hope and what are the main child development areas? There are four main areas or channels in which children grow: physical, psychological, and cognitive, and social and emotional, and sexuality and gender identity. Children's bodies grow in height and weight over the years and change appearance during puberty. Children also develop certain physical abilities during their progression towards adulthood, including crawling, walking, running, and possibly writing or shooting basketball. So, children develop psychologically and cognitively as their brains absorb more information and they learn how to use that information. Children grow socially and emotionally and they learn how to interact, play, work, and live with other people, such as family, friends, teachers, and employers. They learn how to understand both their own feelings and others' emotion and ways of dealing with the strong emotions. Children must develop a sense of self-esteem as they go through the long process of figuring out what shape their identity or who they are will take. They also develop a sense of morality as they learn the difference between the right and wrong. And finally, children have to develop sexually and form of gender identity. Early on, children learn how their bodies work and look and what it means to be a boy or a girl. They learn how boys and girls are different. As they grow older and enter adolescence and puberty, they continue to learn how their bodies work sexually and how to responsibly handle their sexuality so as to balance their sexual desires and appropriate behaviors. So, let's tackle about Simon Freud's theory of child development. In Simon Freud's in 1956 to 1939 was a Viennese doctor who came to believe that the way parents deals with children's basic sexual and aggressive desires would determine how their personalities develop and whether or not they would end up well adjusted as adults. Freud described children as going through multiple stages sexual development, which is labeled oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. In Freud's view, each stage focused on sexual activity and the pleasure received from the particular area of the body. In the oral phase, children are focused on the pleasures that they receive from sucking and beating with their mouth. In the anal phase, this focus shifts in the anus as they begin toilet training and attempts to control their bowels. In the phallic stage, the focus moves to genital stimulation and the sexual identification that comes with the having or not having a penis. Another part of Freud's theory focused on identifying the parts of the consciousness. Freud thought that all babies are initially dominated by unconscious, instinctual, and selfish urges of immediate gratification, which he labeled the ID. As babies attempt and fail to get all their whims met, they develop a more realistic appreciation of what is realistic and possible, which Freud called the ego. Over time, babies also learned about that and come to internalize and represent their parents' values and rules, which he called the superego. So the superego is the basis for the child's conscience and struggles with the concepts of right and wrong and works with the ego to control the immediate gratification urge of the ID. By today's rigorous scientific standards, Freud's psychosexual theory is not considered to be very accurate, but it is still important and influential today because it was the first stage development theory that gained real attention and many other theories used it as starting place. So another theory is Erik Erikson's theory of child development. So Erik Erikson in 1902 to 1994 used Freud's work as a starting place to develop theory about human stage development from birth to death. Erikson focused on how people's sense or identify develops, how people develop or fail to develop abilities and beliefs about themselves which allow them to become productive, satisfied members of society. Because Erikson's theory combined how people develop beliefs psychologically and mentally with how they learn to exist within a larger community of people. It's called a psychosocial theory. Erikson's stages are chronological order in which they unfold: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. Each stage is associated with the time of life and general span. For each stage, Erikson's theory explains what types of stimulation children need to master that stage and become productive and well-adjusted members of society, and explains the types of problems and developmental delays that can result when this stimulation does not occur. So another theory is Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of child development. So in Lawrence Kohlberg's theory, It describes three stages of moral developmental which describe the process through which people learn to discriminate right from wrong and to develop increasingly sophisticated appreciations of morality. So Kohlberg believed that these stages were cumulative and that each built of understanding and abilities gained in prior stages. According to Kohlberg, moral development is a lifelong task and many people fail to develop the more advanced stages of moral understanding. So Kohlberg's first pre-conventional level describes children whose understanding of morality is essentially only driven by consequences. Second stage is conventional. Morality describes people who act in moral ways because they believe that following the rules is the best way to promote good personal relationships and healthy community. The final conventional level describes people who instead of just following rules without questioning them, determine what is moral based on a set of values and beliefs they think are right all the time. Then another theory is Jean Piaget's theory of child development. Jean Piaget is a Swiss psychologist who created a cognitive developmental stage theory that describes how children's way of thinking developed as they interacted with the world around them. So Piaget's theory has 4 stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. During the sensory motor stage, which often lasts from birth to age 2, children are just beginning to learn how to learn. The major tasks occurring during this period involve children figuring out how to make use of their bodies, which they do by experiencing everything with their 5 senses. So during the pre-operational stage, which often lasts from 2 to 7, children start to use mental symbols to understand and to interact with the world, and they begin to learn language and to engage in pretend play. In the concrete operational stage that follows, lasting from ages 7 through 11, children gain the ability to think logically, to solve problems, and to organize information they learn. During the formal operational stage, which often lasts from age 11 on, adolescents learn how to think about abstractly, to solve problems, and to think symbolically, for example, about things that aren't really there concrete in front of them. So another theory is Yuri Bronfenbrenner's theory. So in Bronfenbrenner's theory, it developed the ecological systems theory to explain how everything in a child and a child's environment affects how a child grows and develops. He labeled different aspects of levels of the environment that influence children's development, including the microsystem, the mesosystem, and exosystem, and the macrosystem. The microsystem is the small immediate environment the child lives in and includes any immediate relationship of organizations they interact with, such as their immediate family, caregivers, and their school or daycare. The mesosystem describes how the different parts of a child microsystem work together for the sake of the child. The exosystem level includes the other people and places that the child herself may not interact with often herself, but that still have a large effect on her, such as parents, workplace, extended family members, and neighborhood, and etc. In macrosystem, is the largest and the most remote set of people and things to a child, but which still has a great influence over the child, such as the relative freedoms permitted by the national government, cultural values, and economic wars. So that's all for about the child and adolescent development. Thank you.